My name is Dawson, and I live in the UK. I work with students with IFES. I'm on the Europe team, and I've got two jobs. One of them is to raise up female evangelists, and one of them is to help staff and students introduce their friends to Jesus through the Gospels. So I train people. And today we're thinking about building community as a bridge to the gospel. So all of us, apart from you, have come together because we want to think about community, even though our communities are very different. And I think during the pandemic, there was an increased sense and awareness of community. For us in the UK, it was a really big thing. You couldn't drive, you couldn't walk too far. It was all about where you lived and who was on your street. Apart from Zoom or phone calls, the only people I saw were my neighbours. So it was a huge phenomenon in the pandemic placed on community, and it made me think a lot. So for us in the UK, every Thursday at I think 7 or 8 o'clock, everyone would go onto the street and clap, and we'd say thank you to our NHS medical health service. Never have our street done that before. But also on our street, there was an old man who couldn't get to the shops, and people, for the first time ever, offered to buy him bread and milk every week. Our neighbour, he's a 19-year-old boy, and we started talking over the fence for the first time ever. So there was this increased sense of who is around us, who lives near us, who lives on our street. But it wasn't just our neighbours, it wasn't just St Catherine's Road. This is my front door. I'll explain the photo at some point. Many people reported getting in touch with old friends. So some of my friends said, I had a Zoom call, a Zoom quiz with my university friends. We last saw each other 20 years ago, 15 years ago. Maybe it was gathering your whole family together on Zoom. There was this increased sense of belonging and community that happened during the pandemic. And I think there's an incredible opportunity as Christians to speak into that. Because at the very heart of God, at the very heart of who God is, as we see in John 17, God has relationship, Father, Son, and Spirit. There is relationship between the Father, Son, and Spirit. And so Christians have the ultimate reason to believe in community because of the God we believe in, a God who's at relationship at the very heart of who he is. So we have the ultimate reason to believe in community. And I think that community is something that people want. And community is something people are intrigued about, but they don't know how to get. And maybe the pandemic showed them, but now that COVID is gone, what does it mean now to be in a community? Have we lost that sense of community? What is my new community post-pandemic? So I have some questions. How do we as Christians care about and build community? And I hope that today you can help me with that. What I wanted to do first of all is look in the Bible, and I'd really love you to discuss on your tables. So maybe no more than 3 people in the discussion, so split in 2. I'd love you to read these verses from 1 Thessalonians and then just discuss the question, what do these verses teach us about community? Okay, so let me read for you and then you can discuss for 5 minutes or so. For we know, brothers and sisters, loved by God, that he has chosen you because our gospel came to you, not simply with words, but also with power, with the Holy Spirit and deep conviction. You know how we lived among you for your sake. You became imitators of us and of the Lord, for you welcomed the message in the midst of severe suffering with the joy given by the Holy Spirit. And so you became a model to all believers in Macedonia and Achaia. The Lord's message rang out from you not only in Macedonia and Achaia, your faith in God has become known everywhere. And then a bit later, we loved you so much that we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well, because you had become so dear to us. Surely you remember, brothers, our toil and hardship. We worked night and day in order not to be a burden to anyone, while we preach the gospel of God to you. Okay, so we're going to think about two major themes in this seminar. One is speaking clearly and loving dearly. That's the first one. And the second one is how loving and speaking can lead to others coming to know Christ. Okay, so that's the way we're going. So this letter is a really rich and wonderful model for how we're to live in our communities. There's so much in here. Paul was a missionary to Thessalonica, and he was delighted to share this wonderful good news into the community. He preached with conviction and power and the Holy Spirit. He spoke clearly and saw many come to trust Jesus for themselves. The new believers themselves became sharers of this message too. But they didn't just speak. As you see here, Paul is clear. It is not only the gospel of God that they shared, it was their lives too. Paul lived amongst the Thessalonians for their sake, and he treated them as brothers and sisters. So if you think about his love, it was a familial, devoted love that was radically different. This brotherly love that he had was unselective. It united people, as you can see, that were completely different, but it united them together by Christ. And it was a love that was to be given outwards. This is a gospel brotherly, sisterly love. And this is the kind of love that we're called to give out, not only to other Christians in our community, but to our neighbours and to our work colleagues too. And so like with blood siblings, you can't choose who you're given. You can't choose your family. But you can choose to love. And this love is to be given out to those who are given to you, whether that's your neighbour, your workmate, your family member, the people that God gives you, you choose to love. And it's into these relationships that Paul and others love dearly, and that's the first point I want to really make. Even through suffering, toil and hardship, they loved. But it's not just Paul. I'm just going to skip a line. Early Christianity grew explosively, 40% per decade for nearly 3 centuries. So Tim Keller says this. He says, the early church did not engage in public preaching, not because they didn't like it, but because it was too dangerous. There were practically no evangelists or missionaries whose name we know, and yet the church was growing. Prominent people scorned it. Neighbours discriminated against the Christians in countless petty ways. Periodically, the church was subjected to persecution. It was hard to be a Christian, and still the church grew. Why? Once non-believers were attracted to the community by the lives of the Christians, they became open to talking about the gospel truths that were the source of this kind of life. And so pursue loving dearly and living lives that attract others. It's simple, isn't it? We're to love and choose to love those that God gives us. But I wonder if we've forgotten how to be friends. I read a really good book called Made for Friendship by Drew Hunter. And this is a really excellent book. In the book, he questions whether our modern day friendships are based on convenience or whether they are intentional. So whether they're easy or whether we choose them intentionally. And C.S. Lewis says something similar. He says, to the ancients, friendship seemed the happiest and most fully human of all loves, the crown of life and the school of virtue. The modern world, in comparison, ignores it. So I want us to just stop and take some time to answer these questions, if they come up. Oh, actually, hang on, sorry, that's the wrong one. 2 secs, let me find the right one. Oh yeah, here we go. Okay, take some time, again in threes, to pause and reflect on your friendships. Are they driven by love, self-sacrifice and generosity? Are they able to weather through the storms of life, so go through hardship? As we come out of lockdown, depending on which country you're in, let's be intentional friendships, let's be known as those who build community. So as we come out of lockdown, I think many people presume life should just go back to what it was. It should be easy, we're face to face. But many people have really struggled with friendships. What does it mean to have friendships what is my community now that we're free to do whatever we want? And I think we're encouraged to be as intentional as we can be as we build community and friendships. So let's keep thinking how loving and speaking can lead to others coming to know Jesus. So for me, it was really interesting thinking about community right in the middle of the pandemic. It was the oddest experience ever. It's not the time when you should get to know lots of people and build community. It's the time to close your doors. And in September 2020, I remember clearly praying and being really frustrated and just in my prayers saying to God, how can I love my friends and share the gospel when I can't even see them? Yes, I can see them on social media and we can engage a bit on Zoom, but how can I do this? How can I love my friends and share about you, Jesus, if we're in lockdown? And I remember God clearly saying to me, Nate, where do you think you shouldn't be? It was a really odd thing. I'd never heard God say that before. And it was in the September, and Halloween was fast approaching. That's end of October, November time. And in our area, it's massive. It's bigger than Christmas. It's absolutely massive. And as you can imagine, as a Christian, I've never celebrated Halloween. I just haven't, right? That's the same for all of us. And so every year when Halloween comes and hundreds of people are on our street, we close our curtains and we shut the door and we switch off the lights at the front of the house and nobody thinks we're in. And that means nobody comes to our door. That's what we've done every year. But my children, now 7 and 9, are beginning to say, Mum, everyone's getting ready for Halloween. What are we doing? So I knew the time was approaching. And as I heard God say, where do you think you shouldn't be? I had this sense he was talking about Halloween. And for some reason, I just thought, everyone's struggling with community, everyone's lonely. Why don't I do something that brings people together? Halloween was the next thing on the calendar. So I invited 2 friends to talk who I knew loved Halloween. And I said to them, why don't you organise something for Halloween? It will bring the community together. I don't know why I thought this was a good idea. Anyway, they both said, Nay, we can't organise anything, you should organise it. So I went from never having celebrated Halloween to organising something for my community around something that I didn't believe in. And I came home and I said to the children and my husband, what have I done? This is a disaster. So we sat down together and we prayed as a family, and one of the children said, Mum, Jesus says, I'm the light of the world. Why don't we be the house of light? So we decided that Nay, would organise this big community event for Halloween, but within that we would be a house of light. This is our house. And so it was quite a shock going from never celebrating Halloween to celebrating. What we did is I set up a Facebook page and I named it after our area, Bitton Park, and then I just called it Family Fun because I thought that'd be nice. And I put up an advert saying, would anyone like to do a Halloween trail? So you imagine a map around our community, everyone puts their house on the map, everyone decorates their house. I was amazed, 25 families said they wanted to get involved. None of them are Christians, apart from us, of course. And so we designed a beautiful trail map, and as a family, we just thought through, what does it mean to be a house of light? And so firstly, we bought some very expensive light bulbs so that we could look like light. But also, I listened to an excellent video by Glenn Scrivener on Halloween, and he talks about how because of the cross and the resurrection, we can laugh at darkness. And so I thought to myself, I want to have light and laughter in our front driveway. And so you'll see these pumpkins, they're ginormous. Each of them are the weight of a child. And I decorated them to make people laugh. So I love swimming, so I put swimming hats and swimming costumes on. And I wanted to create humour and laughter at darkness, as well as light. And so as well as that, as well as decorating our house, I decided that I would buy some evangelistic stories, some tracts about light, and I'd put them on the end of my driveway and give out sweets. But I couldn't find anything that I was comfortable with my friends reading. I knew my friends would pick them up. So I decided to write a really simple story about a little boy who was scared of the dark. And in the story, it pointed to Jesus in a very kind of relaxed story sort of way. So we bought these bags, I printed them out, they looked really nice. and we gave them away on the end of our driveway. During the night, we gave away 600 of these bags, and our streets were filled with people. And the one thing that everyone said is, near your house, it just brought light to our street. Thank you for bringing light to our community. And people wrote to me, and they had read the story, and they said, we have never heard about Jesus before, but we want to know more about this person that you're writing about. And this then started a whole thing in lockdown where as a community we got together. So Christmas, we did a traditional nativity, and that was brilliant. And we did lots of these trails, we did lots of stuff together, but every single time it was me and loads of non-Christians coming together. This last year we did a trail based on the Narnia stories, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. And it was incredible. We had 50 houses this time involved, and people enjoyed the story of The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. Each house was decorated a different part of the story. And there were many conversations, like at the park. One of my friends said, Nay, I've been wondering, is Aslan a representation of God? And so then we'd stop and have this conversation. And so for me, I really felt like God was calling me to be salt and light within our community. It took courage and it took bravery. There were many times I just wondered what on earth I was doing. I felt quite alone. But the opportunities to share Jesus with our friends was incredible. We decided this year to do the Halloween House of Light again. This time we went for fun, so we made this massive spider's web that people had to climb through, and we gave away candy floss, and I wrote another story. And again, we had hundreds and hundreds of people visit our house. And it's interesting because although we don't celebrate Halloween, it's the one night of the year that people come to your door and they ask you for something. And what do Christians do? Like me, we close our doors, we shut the curtains, and we switch off the lights and say, no, thank you. So I wonder how God has called you into a community, whoever you are and however you're made. It would be good to think through how you can love more dearly and speak more clearly about Jesus. Now, you're not me, thank goodness. You're you. So God has made you as an individual. He's made you to love things. He's made you good at things. So it's important to think through what it means for you to build community in your area and take those opportunities to speak about Jesus. Just a couple more examples. My friend from church, Tasmin, she joined the local rowing club, and she was a really active member in this rowing club. Eventually they said to her, you're so friendly, why don't you become the welcome person for the club? Now, the amazing thing is she gets the opportunity to set the tone and the culture of the club. So she's gone for full-on loving, friendly, welcoming and warm. A friend of mine, Simon, he joined a new team at work during lockdown. They'd never met each other. And realising that they didn't meet socially, he decided to start a weekly Zoom coffee chat. And the professor said, I have never socially talked with my students before. Thank you for setting this up. And he was just a student himself. I talked to you about my neighbour that we started talking to over the fence. We've lived next to these neighbours for 6 years, and we've said hello in the street, but it was only in lockdown, when we couldn't have community, that something amazing happened. So my neighbour, he's 19 at the time, he stopped us in the street and said, can I come to church with you? Now, this never happens. I don't want to tell these kind of successful stories. It never happens. So me and my husband said, why? We were so shocked. Why do you want to come to church with us? And he said, I've been really depressed, and he's training to be a policeman. He said, all of the senior police officers that I meet talk about the fact that they can only cope with the darkness of their job because of the light that Jesus offers. So in the police force in the UK, he'd met these senior police officers that were Christians. And he said, I want to come to church with you. So he said, of course you can come to church. So he came by Zoom. And then my husband and him started walking in lockdown one-to-one. They would sit on a park bench and they'd read John's Gospel together and they'd discuss it. And on a wet, cold night, he became a Christian during lockdown. He'd never been to church in person, but he knew us. So there's lots of ways that we can build community, and there's lots of ways that we can be bold and brave and speak about Jesus. So what is the community that God has called you to post-pandemic? That's where we are right now. What does it look like for you? Who are the people in your everyday lives, your workplace, your street, your family? And there's just a few things to add, really. So firstly, stop and start praying. Invite other Christians in this community to pray with you. So for me, one of the communities I'm part of is a river swimming club. Now, I love setting things up. You might not do. You might prefer to join things. I like to set them up. And so when lockdown hit and the swimming pools were closed, for years I'd been saying, who wants to swim in the river with me? And nobody did. In fact, people would laugh at me. They'd say, I wouldn't throw my dog in that river. It's called the River Itchin. And they'd say, you go in itching, you come out scratching. And so people were very rude about it, but when the swimming pools were closed, everybody wanted to be my friend and come swimming. And so 2 years ago, last week, I went swimming for the first time in this river with one friend. Now, this friend had seen me advertise on Facebook. She had never swum in a river before, but she was interested. And she happened to be our childminder from 10 years ago. So we are friends for a long time. Her daughter had become a Christian in the youth group that we ran, but she was very anti-Christianity. So we had friendship and history, and we talked about Jesus before. I was delighted that we swam this one time. And then my neighbour said to me, do you mind if you swim with my friend? And I said, of course, come and join us. And she happened to be a Christian from another church in our area. And from the three of us, we are now the 70 people in our river swimming group. We've got a name, we've got a badge. And what's amazing is some Christians have joined and others have joined too. And we've built community by doing the things that we love, doing it often, and doing it with others. And as we've done that, it's been really interesting because Alex, he goes to another church in the city. He's become really good friends with David, who's not a Christian at all. In fact, had no positive history of Christianity in his life. They swim together, they run and they swim together. They've got a really good friendship. And me and some of the others who swim regularly, we pray together for this group. And it's an amazing group, and people join it because we're doing what we love, which is crazy for some. We jump in a cold river with a swimming costume, but I love it. And I think if you want to build community with non-Christians, then do what you love, do it often, and do it with others. But as you think about this kind of community, ask yourself what kind of friendships they are. And often it's easier to think in categories of acquaintances, occasional friends, or deep friendships. And we're not going to discuss this because we're about to finish, but how can you be more intentional in your friendships and move them towards a deep relationship? How can you love your community more? So for me and the river swimming group, it was our birthday last week. And although I was coming here this week and I was tired, I wanted to do a birthday party. That's what you do when you celebrate the people you love. You have a birthday party. So I got my friend to design a badge that said 2. We loved collecting badges, and we had a big party. We swam together. Everyone dressed up in fancy dress. We had cake afterwards. And people said to me, Nate, we want to pay you for these badges. And I said, no, it's a gift. It's a gift of love. It's a gift of generosity. It's my gift to you. And the replies were just really heartwarming. Thank you, Nate. Thanks so much for building a community. These are people we love. These are our friends. This is where we find home. Into that, Christians are praying for each other. They're chatting. They're doing one-to-one friendship. And we're swimming lots and lots. So remember, we need to speak clearly as well as love dearly. I'm sure we lean towards one or the other. And we need Christians to help us. So whether that's Christians in your swimming group or in your church or somebody, make sure that you're praying with other Christians about your community. We need to take every opportunity to share the gospel. It will always take courage. It will always take boldness, and we'll never feel ready or prepared enough to do it. But when we step out and courageously share the gospel to the entire community or one-to-one, we're honouring Jesus and sharing his word with others. So take the opportunity not just to communicate the gospel one-to-one, but publicly. That's what I loved about these trails. It was public. Hundreds of people came. Thousands saw it on Facebook. And amongst those groups, for anybody that wanted to know more, they knew to come to me. They knew it because I was organising it. It was clear it was Nay that was running it. And the number of people that stopped me in the street and said, Nay, can I just talk to you about something? And so I think it's really important. We've forgotten how to publicly communicate the gospel, but you can do it in a beautiful way. Remember my photo? This is beautiful. Not that one. This. My house looked beautiful, and there's an article that I read once talking about how the gospel is beauty, goodness, and truth. And we major on truth. We forget goodness and beauty. And so what we do in the Kingfisher Summers is that we have beauty, and it often points people back to Jesus. So take the opportunity to communicate the gospel publicly. You'll never know who living near you might be interested in finding out more. You'll never know. I swim, my daughters and I swim in a swimming club in a swimming pool, not in a river, and the coach is not the friendliest of men. And last week at a coaching session, he knew that I'd gone to Greece last week with work, and he knew I was coming to Poland. And in front of everyone, he said, Nay, what's your problem? Is the UK not religious enough for you? And I was like, wow. 1, you obviously know somehow I'm a Christian. 2, we have never talked about Christianity. 3, how on earth do you know I'm a Christian? So we're Facebook friends, and he must have picked up from something I put on Facebook. I usually talk about women and Christianity. He must have picked up I was a Christian and that I work for a Christian organisation. What a wonderful opportunity. So I know him better through Facebook than I do in person, but he's opened the doors for me to say, why do you say that? Where does that come from? Let's have a chat about that at some point. So take the opportunity to communicate the gospel publicly. You'll never know who living near you might be interested in finding out more, whether that's through your social media, a community trail, an evangelistic course, or a church service. And remember, Christians simply loving dearly and speaking clearly is how other people come to know and trust Jesus for themselves. So I hope that's been helpful. It's very basic, but I think that 1 Thessalonians is what you need to do to just keep on going in your communities.